Thank you very much, and welcome, Jamie. So I was actually thinking we could structure this conversation a little bit like an AI prompt. Okay? Something like we'll start with some like background information and context.
Yeah.
Then we'll sort of get into the meat of it, like what do we really want to talk about? Sort of if this happens, maybe this. If this happens, maybe this. And then we can think about kind of the final output and how we see things going, and maybe we'll open it up to some Q&A. So starting with our context prompt, can you just briefly introduce yourself and Kyndryl and give us as the collective LLM the context for the rest of the conversation?
First, thanks for having me. Thanks to Columbia Business School. Thanks to the Tamer Institute and Fair Chance Futures. It's great that you guys are doing this. Thank you very much. First AI prompt question. Let me think here. Jamie Rutledge. I been in this business a long time, longer than many of us here, I think. I've worked in 10 countries. I'm married, 2 boys, 17 and 18. I work for Kyndryl. Think of it as a 4-year-old startup, I guess, easiest way to put it. I love what I do. And if there's one thing that I've sort of learned in my career is love what you do, because that makes the world a difference. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. 4-year-old startup, turning 5 this year, correct?
Yeah, we still do that type of stuff. Yeah, age-appropriate stuff. Yeah.
I feel like most startups don't make ballpark $15 billion a year.
Yeah.
So that seems different than what I think we think of a 4-year-old company being. So you kind of inherited this business, but now I think the business looks really different than 4 years ago. Mm. And then, if Kyndryl started in 2021, ChatGPT happens November 2022.
Yeah.
Going back to that time, like fall of 2022 into spring of 2023, was the writing sort of on the wall around large language models and transformer models prior to that? Or was that really this kind of like out of left field kind of feeling where it was like, oh, all the plans we had, we need to start rethinking these things? Because presumably you were fresh off whatever that initial set of plans was.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with a little bit about Kyndryl too.
Great.
Just as a grounding point. So Kyndryl, we do mission critical stuff, mission critical IT. Another word for mission critical is hopefully invisible. Probably the easiest way to think about it. Let me give you some examples. Airlines are one of my biggest customers. When my team makes a mistake or there's a problem, the airlines, they don't fly. You can't check in. You can't get clearance for maintenance. So that's a real thing, right? You can't get maintenance done on an airplane. Insurance companies, you can't file a claim. You can't use any of your insurance. Banks, most of the internet banking infrastructure, 55% of the world's mainframes, so think big compute, we manage that. Cars, right? 2 big car companies here in the US are my customers. If you like anyone here have a Jeep, right? I can tell you that, that goes through us. A few other car companies as well. And then there's, of course, consumer and travel. The biggest rental car, I was with one of them yesterday. There are customers. So if you ever go to one of your rental car companies and you can't rent a car, that was probably us behind the scenes. So think of Kyndryl as we manage a race car, probably the easiest way to look at it. And running a race car around a track very fast, a lot of people can do that, but we can do it while changing the engine and probably changing the tires at the same time. And in the world of AI, we're going to accelerate while we're at it, right? So that's the game. That's what we do. Great question about 2022. This AI journey, it's not new. The tech works. The tech has worked since the beginning. Machine language, the classical AI, the Gen AI, the agentic AI, whatever's next, all of that is happening real time. I see it as a massive opportunity. And it's a massive opportunity, not just for companies like Kyndryl, who can clearly benefit from that, but from each one of you here. And for the graduates of Columbia's Business School, before this, I took a walk off the aisle just to get to know the audience. And, there was a bunch of students here, of course, and a little jealous of them, to be honest, because, they're this, they've got their whole career ahead of them and what they're going to do. And, you're entering an unprecedented time. And it's an unprecedented time that has tons of opportunity. So congratulations on that and good luck on that part. It's going to be awesome. It's going to get better.
It is an exciting, kind of junction in the business world, graduating into this time seems, uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll come back to that word.
Yeah.
But it's also exciting, right? Because it's not obvious what's going to happen in the world or to any individual person, Kyndryl's so interesting. All the examples you gave, I think all of them, maybe banking aside, are sort of physical things like a plane, a car.
Yeah.
And I think when people think about IT, they often think about software. Obviously, all those businesses have software to manage. But this idea of this sort of invisible, machine that is sitting underneath everything that we do all day as a society, that rabbit hole goes very deep. And I would imagine historically moves pretty slow. Can you give us some context about what it means, for an airline or one of these big businesses to sort of have these big computing needs and IT management that, I think AWS launched now 20 years ago, but still a lot of big businesses are not on the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And that might not even be the right goal for a lot of businesses. But I think in daily parlance, we're all sort of oh, cloud, 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 cloud. Are there any benefits to on-prem still?
Yeah.
Years later?
It's a good question. I'd say probably 80% of what I see is still on-prem, right? 80% of the environment. Cloud's big, cloud's important, cloud helps transform. I see it as, when cloud started, it was kind of a cost play. It's not a cost play. That's not the point. It's an accelerator, right? Accelerator for change. That's how we see it. But these big applications, these big complex applications, you talk about the reservation system, or you talk about the applications that are used to make and track the production of cars, or you talk about all the payment systems, and I know you're familiar with that part of the world, right? Those are really complex things. They're, maybe the easiest way to look at it is applications that are cloud native, designed on cloud from the get-go, they're relatively straightforward to manage. That's not the world that I see.
Right.
I see some of that, but that's the minority. Most of it has multiple legs and multiple things. And when you think of Kyndryl, there's really three things that when I sell services to customers, there's three sort of patterns that I look for that really nails whether there's an opportunity. The first is it mission critical, right? Is it important? Mission critical means if it doesn't work, the CEO probably knows within an hour. That's what we're talking about, mission critical. It's really important. The second thing is it's complex. So for me, complexity is good. Complexity means that I have an important role. If it's incredibly simple, there's lots of companies that can do that. The more complex, the better for me. And then the last one, if it has a need to continuously modernize, continuously innovate, continuously improve, this concept of continuous is very important. So, you brought back to, we do a lot of infrastructure and applications for things that are things. That's true. We also do a lot of infrastructure for people, right? So I didn't mention, for example, hospitals. If you've ever used the application MyChart, right, to make an appointment to go see a doctor or find out the status of your prescription you're picking up, that's an Epic application. We manage a lot of that, right? So it's important. We impact people's lives. We impact businesses in a major way. And when you bring it back to your last question here, and you asked a longer question, I'll give you a longer answer around AI. AI is part of everything. Every single thing I sell today has AI in it. Every single thing. Every single tool that any employee at Kyndryl uses has AI.
I know there's no perfect analogy, but do you think of AI, and specifically generative AI, as something kind of like a relational database, or something that was novel and now is just sort of embedded in every single piece of software, and we don't point it out because it's so obvious? Of course, there's a database.
Yeah. I'll date myself. When I graduated from college, I was an expert in numerical modeling, finite element modeling, and that type of thing. And at the time, that meant I was really good at Excel, right? That's kind of what it meant, right? I was great at that. I see a lot of these AI tools today as kind of like that, to be honest, right? When I graduated, Excel was, Excel, that makes you special. Yeah, these AI tools, they all know them. I use them. They're tightly integrated in everything we do. The tech works, and maybe just to help sort of what's maybe a good next prompting type of question that we can go down is, the tech works, but that's not the challenge. The challenge is elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. It's how do you leverage it? How do you implement it? How do you get adoption within an organization? Yeah. All these kinds of things. And I think there's that almost assumes that there's a coherent strategy, and all we need to do is implement it. But I think even at the strategic level, that's tricky. So, I mean, you're in the business of advising and consulting companies on how to come up with that strategy and then to help them implement it. Ironically, you're selling to the enterprise, and you also are an enterprise. So how do you think about the strategy and implementation of AI even within Kyndryl? And is that the same thing you prescribe to your customers?
Yeah. Clearly, we call it customer zero. That's the right. Some big companies are, that's what they call these types of things. So we are a big user of AI. All of our tools, all of the applications we use are all in the cloud. Right? That's what we do. For our customers, you brought up a point. Do we advise them on strategy? I'm doing less of that. What I find for customers is they're not actually looking for that advice. They're looking for, how do you help me move faster? How do you inject speed, right? We're trying to, if you think about what we can do for customers, there's a level of modernization. For the infrastructure, it's just run it better with AI. Then there's the applications, allow me to build my business faster with applications built with AI. And then there's the business processes, is help me be a better AI company, right? That's kind of where we're going. And all of our customers have a similar ambition. And if, the discussions, you think back to 2022, there were what and why discussions. What do you recommend? Why do you recommend it? I don't really do that anymore. It's cut to the chase. Tell me the how.
Got it. Right. Because the how is maybe harder in the end.
The how is spectacularly harder. And the how is hard to do at scale. So, there's this concept called proof of concept, you might have heard. I don't use that because it implies that the concept might not work, right? It's proof of outcome. The tech works. It's done. Tech works. The implementation of the tech at scale, wicked hard. The adoption of the tech at scale, to be determined.
Yeah. Adoption is a big piece, I think. AI is weird too, because if your customers are looking to move faster and looking for better business outcomes sooner, it can make them grow top-line revenue faster. It can also help cut costs. Where do you see your customers focusing more, or is it both at the same time?
Depends who you talk to. You talk to a CFO, it's normally about cost, right? That's just how that rolls. You talk to anyone else, it's not. Depends on the buyer, right? So if you're dealing with the IT team, they're generally managed to cost. You're dealing with the application team, the business team. They're generally talking about more agility, more speed, more reaction, more affinity with the business. You talk about business, it's all about revenue growth. It's all about growth. I see all of them. When you look at AI as a productivity engine, right? What it's doing around software right now, I never thought would be technically possible. I was an engineer by training. I actually like the flashy lights things. I like the stuff like that. My team, a couple of them are here. They know I live in a world of spreadsheets and P&L and risk and all that other stuff. That's part of my job, and I love my job, like I say, but I really like and I really adore getting it into with the engineers and talking the technical minutia, right? That's where the action's at now.
When you think about what are the skills that are going to be really vital in this new world, or evolving world, since it's new world makes it sound like there's some destination we're going to get to, but I don't think that's really true. It's just forever changing. IT as an industry and maybe as like a persona, if you close your eyes and imagine an IT professional, I think IT folks have a reputation for being kind of like rigid. And, if you remember this old SNL sketch where Jimmy Fallon plays the IT guy and he's like, move over, I'll do it, and kind of they know everything. But things are constantly changing in IT. That's not new. It's always been the case. But now it feels like the roller coaster is just getting steeper and steeper with change. And how do you think about that as an industry and what it takes to like be a good IT professional and IT business? How's the whole function changing in this evolving environment?
If you think that, the rate of change today has never been this slow, right? This is as slow as it will ever be, which is staggering.
This is the worst AI.
Yeah, this is like we are today. As slow as it will ever be right now, and it's only getting faster. That's the answer. The flip side of that question. I look for a number of things. Kyndryl has 80,000 plus employees, and a lot of them work for me. And I look for a number of things in people, and maybe this is probably the more simple way to ask, or for me to answer the question. The number one thing that I believe about people, and this is more of what I personally believe, is everyone wants to do intelligent work. And the definition of intelligent work is a moving target. And so if you buy that premise that everyone wants to do intelligent work, then you buy into the premise of curiosity is good, or curiosity is valuable. Being uncertain is important. I see that with some of the people that we hire. I really look for this level of uncertainty, and I'll come back to that in a sec. Of course, I want people that are hard work. Of course, I want people that align with our culture. But I also want this spirit of almost how they deal with customers and how they think about things and how they're prepared to actually think and work differently. The group, it's hard for, I learned one way, so it's hard for me to think differently. And I'm learning about that. But if you can think differently and work differently, and you could be open to that, and you can have the right balance on uncertainty and creativity, you can make a lot of progress, and you'll be continuously valuable to companies.
Funny, uncertain, I feel like normally has a negative connotation. So I really like kind of drawing that out. I found in my own work and personal life, for that matter, that the older I get or the more experience I get, the less I realize I know. Like I thought I knew more previously, and rather than knowing more and more, I know less and less.
Yeah, I have children. I know that.
That's for sure.
So let me talk about the word uncertainty.
Yeah.
Okay, because you're right. It's true. Uncertainty is generally perceived as a negative word. In my world, people who have that right level of uncertainty know how to ask the right questions, know what to question and when, and more importantly, know how to do it in a collaborative way while demonstrating empathy and restlessness to customers. That's A+, right? That's what I'm looking for. So if you think about it, as you go higher in an organization, I believe it's more and more important to be less and less certain, because certainty is the kind of the flip side of the coin on innovation, right? So a lot of the people I see that get in we'll call it the middle manager layer, right? They have to go through this transition where they're no longer defined by their brains, right? So a lot of people, they get promoted because they're just excellent at something. So by definition, they are the expert. That's how their personal brand is. They're an expert. So by definition, as an expert, you're certain. That's how you define yourself. But as you go higher, and as you get more breadth, and as AI comes in, and as things change, remember, we're as slow as we will ever be now. This power to be uncertain is a real powerful tool. And I see a lot of people, as they develop their careers, they reach this inflection point of, is it okay to be uncertain? And when you define yourself as an expert, to your point, that can be a little bit scary for some people. So that's, I come back to the thinking differently and working differently. You have to kind of roll with that as you go.
Yeah. I would imagine it's also a very tricky thing to communicate externally. Like imagine you're applying for a job, your resume there says expert in Excel, or expert in using an AI, and the AI uses Excel for me, or whatever. And then they say, so, do you know a lot about Excel? You're like, not really. I'm pretty uncertain about it. Probably don't get the job. And so what do you think are the right ways? Well, maybe Kyndryl seems like the right place to apply. But how do you think is the right way to assert that when someone is early in their career? Is it, or is it that maybe earlier in one's career, you should be focused on honing your craft and just remember not to get too rigid as you go? Or do you think that openness and uncertainty is actually valuable to have and to sort of, advertise about yourself, like from graduation onward?
Look, we hire you because of your capabilities now. I mean, I'm in the business of making money, so you have to bring something to the table that I can sell immediately.
On day one, yes.
Day one, right? I mean, that's it. It's pretty straightforward, right? You have to bring a skill to the table. Just having the skills isn't a good enough reason to get hired, though. Right? That's different. It's a different thing. Do you have the right culture? Do you know how to work hard? Do you collaborate with others? Can you tell me stories about how you've collaborated with others? Can you tell me stories about how you deal with conflict and trust? How do you actually innovate in that environment? How do you solve problems with no answer and incomplete information? Tell me those types of stories about yourself, then you can get a good job.
I tell my students, the latter half of that list of attributes, those are the things that are be very hard for AI to replicate. I think the core skill is the thing that a lot of AI companies are claiming these tools will be able to, at least impede upon. But how do you collaborate with others? How do you deal with conflict? The AI is not going to,
And let me add. AI is always certain.
Yeah.
AI is.
You're right, Paul.
Right? Have you ever asked AI, any AI tool, you ever ask a question that says, I simply don't know?
No, of course not. Right.
Never says that.
And then if you contradict it, it's like, oh.
But if you think,
you're right again.
Yeah, but what am I looking for? I need that level of curiosity and uncertainty. Right. You don't get that with AI. You get certainty all the time. So AI it's never going away. It's awesome. It's like I said, technically, I'll give you a crazy technical example. I have customers, their entire business runs on 50 million lines of COBOL code, right, on a mainframe, right? Straight up, right? If you don't know what COBOL is, look it up, right?
God bless you.
Yeah. You go look it up. And I never thought it was possible to take that type of stuff and put it cloud native, but it is now. Mm-hmm. Like I like the technical stuff, like I was telling you. I had to personally see it to believe it. I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
But it's real now. So AI is incredibly powerful. It's doing things that, when you move, say, COBOL code to cloud native, right? It used to cost $2 to $3 a line of code. Now it's probably 60 cents, right? Every project I do, 40% is done by agents, and that's a good thing. It still means I need more people, but I need people who have the right culture, the right way of thinking, and the right way of working. And they have to be open to a continuous learning environment to keep changing, right? That's what's really valuable. I'll tell you just another anecdote, right? We do a lot of customers where they say, well, we have a lot of people, can you take them as part of the deal, right? The people that are willing to learn always make it. The people that don't, they don't.
Yeah, so again, it's that openness, uncertainty, curiosity. You mentioned agents, so that's where I want to go next. I have this framework that I think about called the death of the individual contributor, where if you imagine, not the literal death, everyone's fine, but like, if you imagine sort of a typical org chart, and you have all these layers of management, and eventually you get to IC. But now the IC has workers, which are the agents.
Agents of agents, yeah.
And so, and then the agents could also be managers, but that's, But even so, that last human in the chain of command now needs a slightly different set of skills if they are managing the work of, which means sort of, giving the instructions and the specifications and the context, being able to review work, give feedback, manager stuff, But now that you sort of delegate to these agents, the agents now gain access to things that traditionally software maybe didn't have access to, like the code base for a coding agent, financials for a finance agent, in every sort of domain, your Excel files for your Excel agent, whatever. And so as IT now evolves to sort of keep up with this emerging technology, to me that introduces like a whole new array of sort of threat vectors and data, provenance issues. And I don't need to tell you, this is your whole business, but does anything keep you up at night in the sense where you're like, man, if the agent pretends to be the CEO of one of my customers,
that already happens, yeah.
And spoofs an email, and I don't know, or even if a malicious human tries to trick the agent into doing something, what are the things that you feel like
the hardest part?
The hardest things, yeah.
There's two things that are hard right now that we haven't yet been able to figure out, right? One is the statement of the obvious, which is the broad level adoption, right? You run into people, and people are complex. And that's a good thing, but it also presents a challenge because everyone learns at a different pace, everyone sees things a different way. I mean, just anything, that's hard. So adoption is hard. I think it's always going to be hard. I think that we're going to probably make the most money on the adoption curve, not on the tech side. I think that's where the true monetization is going to happen. The other thing that we're trying to sort out is how do you get the right guardrails on this? And guardrails is important. Imagine you're an airline and Kyndryl manages all of your IT. And you know that to fly planes, it has to run. Would you be certain that it would be okay for the agents to do whatever it wants? Probably not, right? You're not going to get there. So how do you build the rules? How do you build the guardrails? And how do you get the AI to respect those rules to make sure you keep it within that guardrails of decision making? That's the hardest part for us. There's ways to do it. There's all the technology around it. It's still hard because you're gated by imagination and you're gated by what people can think it can do. But you look at what's happening with the Mythos stuff and all this other stuff, it all of a sudden can jump technology stacks. It all of a sudden can break guardrails. It all of a sudden can chain together disparate technologies to find vulnerabilities. All of that stuff wasn't contemplated. That wasn't actually a question. So back to the curiosity, no one actually asked that question because no one thought that could happen. Like it wasn't a considered thing.
It wasn't anticipated properly.
Yeah. So when I'll give it easy on vulnerabilities. When you patch a single technology by technology. You don't think about the chaining together of different technologies and how those vulnerabilities would actually cascade at increasing vulnerability levels. You don't get there. So that's how that works. So that's I don't know, for the business school students here, maybe go think about that one.
Yeah. I think this idea of guardrails is in a lot of ways the next great frontier. You have this raw capability. And for those that aren't familiar with Mythos, this is the new Anthropic model that's too dangerous to release, which is amazing marketing, but also sounds like quite harmful, in the wrong hands. And now they have another initiative, Project Glasswing, to protect against the model that they created. Anyway, but
By the way, cool sales strategy, right?
amazing. I can't give it to you. It's too dangerous. Please give it to me. So I do think that, the whole mental model of an agent, God forbid, taking over the plane, is that it's not software in the traditional sense. Until recently, when we said software, that was synonymous with deterministic systems, where the same exact input would always yield the same exact output.
Yeah.
You might have a bug in the software, but then if you patch that bug from that moment forward, that particular set of conditions will always yield the same output. And now in these non-deterministic systems, you might get 99 out of 100, you might get 999 out of 1,000, you might get, very, very close, but you could never guarantee 100% on anything.
Where AI excels and where we use it extensively is finding the anomalies in those data sets, right? So when you use IT tools, you pick any of the classical IT tools, list out 10 of them, doesn't matter, and you do all of them at a certain level give slightly different insights, right? There's a set of exhaust that comes out of all these tools, right? You actually ingest all of that exhaust and you apply all these AI technologies against it, and they find anomalies, and the anomalies present insights, and the insights, for me, turns into opportunities to improve or to sell something. That's how it all works, right? Pretty straightforward. Those complexities and those anomalies, it's not a single AI technology. Where our tool sets, it's more than 24 of them. We kind of make the AIs compete with each other, see what happens, right? It's fascinating because this question of anomalies and uncertainties and insights, that's where AI truly excels. But the interpretation around what you should do about it, that's people.
Yeah.
Because it finds anomalies and you're like, oh, I never thought that could even be possible.
We built this system, we call it tournament mode. And basically there's certain things where you have multiple agents running different models, evaluating the same thing. And if they all come up with identical answers, then we sort of consider that like a consensus. But any discrepancy is then elevated to sort of like an arbitrator, higher reasoning model tournament. And you keep sort of going until you either achieve consensus or you abandon and go to a human.
One of the problems I see in that is most people give structured data to AI models. That's a mistake.
Oh, that's interesting. Elaborate on that.
Yeah. So we always, everyone wants everyone has almost, what I find anyway, not everyone, but most people have sort of a pattern in their head that they want the data is going to support some sort of hypothesis they have. And they naturally kind of put their thumb on the scale to push it that way, right? They're not trying to game the system, but their thumb's definitely on the scale. If you use all unstructured data, you can actually get around that. The minute you actually allow, to your point, you've now gated it by a specific question. You have introduced a data set, so you're competing against it. You've already put your thumb on the scale because you need to give it more unstructured data. So what I'd encourage you to do on something like that, ingest on round 2, new data that's unstructured and see what happens.
Right, give additional context.
You might even then have to ask a different question.
Yeah.
So again, it's you have to think about this concept that you have, this concept of success in AI. Data is, of course, central to everything, but getting command of your data is hard because data is pretty much everywhere. But then if you can bring the data together into a data model that's useful for AI, that's actually hard to do as well without putting your thumb on the scale.
This idea of structured versus unstructured data, I mean, we could talk for an hour just about this, but just to highlight it for everybody, and you can pull on this thread later. But I've been thinking about this in general, like think of something like an earnings report. So you have all of this unstructured business, all of your customer conversations and all of your internal things, and everything's a work in motion. And then you have to take this sort of arbitrary snapshot. And the reason we all love structured data so much is because you can put it in a spreadsheet and you can compare apples to apples. But it's almost like a representation of something with a multi-dimensional business that we put into this set of numbers. And that's true for any sort of quantitative data. And then what happens, you have an earnings call, and then all these analysts basically try to unquantify it back into qualitative analysis on the other side. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to think about a future with AI where a lot less needs to be quantified and structured in general, because we can go from unstructured to unstructured directly. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Maybe I can give you an example in my business, right? So you look at infrastructure, the most simplistic stuff that comes out of infrastructure is, call it disk memory, CPU issues, okay? Just those are usual things, okay? There's a whole ton of, we'll call it monitoring alerts and incidents that come of that. That's real basic. That's roughly 30-40% of an IT team's job is to do that. Now what happens is you can actually use AI to make sure that's fixed fast or fixed before break. You can do that, which is cool, but that was actually cool 2 years ago, right? That's how this is moving. So now it's looking at it, you can take, okay, it's 35% of an IT workload is incidents. You can have the AI make that all go away, right? That's a lot of money saved and a lot of capacity freed up that you can train to do other things. That's a lot of value, right? But what we're learning now with AI is you didn't really fix it. You fixed it on that moment. So that specific condition that actually happened at that time under a unique situation happened, but you didn't fix the underlying business process or application that was actually causing it all the way downstream. Now, if you collect over time that information, you build a book of insights, as it were, over time to actually look at that, then you can actually go to a company and you can go back to the business and say, over the last 3 months, we fixed all of the stuff before it breaks, or we fixed it very fast. But now we actually know the true root cause, and the root cause actually has to do with how your business process is designed, and that's actually gating how much you can tie it to something.
You go way upstream.
Yeah, so the new agentic AI models that we're using now is using this to actually help us identify sales opportunities. Right now, I am in the business of making money. I am also in the business of having a slight advantage over my competitors, right? So that would be good. So if I can use AI to give me knowledge that no one else has, that can help me in the sales force. If I can use AI to actually identify patterns of which I should be selling, right? That's the sales nirvana.
And exactly what to say. Those magical words in the sales meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we move to Q&A, the name of this talk is Winning with AI. I guess my question is, what does winning mean? And is it any different with AI than what winning meant without AI when it comes to business?
Winning always means growth. Okay, so that's it. Winning means growth and ever increasing margins. That's winning.
And AI is just a new way to do it.
And if I can, I was with a major insurance company actually it was last week, right? The CEO asked me, well, what are my competitors doing? That's the question. How is everyone else doing on AI? I said, good news, bad news. Good news is you're all the same. Bad news, like you're all at a same kind of, like no one actually has jumped ahead.
I know where this is going.
Right? Yeah. Bad news is, we're still curious to see who actually puts the bet on the right thing to actually jump ahead of the competition. So that's going to happen. So another piece of winning, I believe the companies that actually run their business with AI and embrace that, they'll get a competitive advantage because of the acceleration of technology that I don't think will be overcome. I think that you'll see that by industry. I think that's what's going to happen next. There's going to be companies that all of a sudden crack the nut on doing it at scale and adopting it at scale. And I think they'll just lap the field.
And there's some urgency to that too. I think there's like an arbitrage opportunity in the near term.
They won't catch up. It's too hard to catch up by that point.
So that's how companies can win in AI. So the second part of my question is, how can individual people entering the workforce, people in the workforce, in management, students coming out of school, I think there is this feeling of, I know I'm supposed to be good at AI, and connecting the dots of what that really means. Like, you have teenage sons, right?
I have boys, 17 and 18. They're exactly like you think they are.
But they might be the last generation to really remember using the internet without AI.
I don't think they know that. Yeah, they don't know. They call me a dinosaur. They think I know exactly nothing about tech. They call me an IT manager. I have a slightly bigger job than that. My kids are amazing. I'm very proud. I love my children, but it's a good reality check for me, right? I asked my 17-year-old, is he ready for the test? He goes, well, I used AI to write a few practice tests. I did 5 of them. And then I had AI grade the test and tell me where I need to learn. And I'm going to do the crash course tomorrow on the 2 things I couldn't get. That was it. I was like, what AI technology? He goes, which one was free? That was it. That was the conversation. And he kind of just dismissed me. I mean, that was my 17-year-old, just like that. Right? I didn't teach him anything.
Apparently neither did his teachers.
No, he just did it, huh? I don't know, hats off to the kids on that. I got to tell you, so, my sons, and it's a personal statement, but I think it goes to that generation. They have one advantage that I can never have. They actually learned differently. So I have a problem in that I have 30 years of institutional, maybe longer actually, 30 years of institutional knowledge and work. And I probably have, we'll go with 45 plus years of learning one way. Okay, that's a lot. That's a big headwind, as they call it, right? That's a lot to overcome. My kids don't have that. They've only ever learned one way. And I learned actually a different way. And I learned a way that doesn't really work today. So I have to unlearn how I learned. And that's hard for me to do. So it's good having kids. It brings you a little bit of sobering reality on this. So anyway, I don't know if that helps you, but that's a personal story for you. You can probably feel it in the tenor of my voice. I'm incredibly proud of my kids, but I'm a little bit jealous too, huh? Because they have opportunities that I never even imagined possible.
Maybe the lesson is we should all hang out with some teenagers.
I'll tell you a slightly humorous story, and this will probably, it'll nail that comment. I have 70% of the people that work for us are in India, okay? We hire thousands of, we call them early professional hires, I think just out of college, right? And we hire thousands of them. And the last group of 1,000, we hire 1,000 at a time, it's a big thing. The last group of, maybe this was a year ago, a group of 1,000 we hired, it was unusual for me. I had an escalation that I had to urgently go to India. Okay, that doesn't really happen very often, right? I have to go. There's a major problem. This last grouping of early professional hires is very unhappy, and I have to go to India to sort it out. Okay, so I fly all the way to Bangalore, and if you've ever been, Bangalore, India is an amazing place. Bangalore is my favorite Indian city. It's fantastic. I've been to India more than 70 times. It's an amazing place. Anyway, I get to Bangalore. I meet with the team, and they tell me that their problem is how they're being taught. And I said the exact words, I still remember this, is, we went to school and we learned one way, and then we came to Kyndryl and you're teaching us a different way. It seems like you're teaching us the way that was done 20 years ago, and we want to know if what we learned in school, we should unlearn and learn a different way. So actually, I had to change the teachers. So the whole escalation was I had the wrong teachers. So your point of listening to teenagers, you got to pick the right teachers. And yeah, that was my lesson learned there. I didn't think of it. So I have to admit, I look at your profession, you know, you're a professor of business school here, and you've got a hard job. Got a hard job. And I think getting the right teachers in front of people is gonna, that's the secret of that. So anyway, that's my story on this. And hopefully, I don't know if that resonates with everyone, but Bangalore's pretty close to here, at least in terms of how people think, as far as I can tell. So,
absolutely, thank you. I think we should open it up for some Q&A. So we have this microphone set up, so we don't have to do the thing where we're like passing around the mic. So if anyone has a question, you can come down to the mic and feel free to line up along the stairs. And you know, genres of questions could be anything, but you know, I always encourage people to bring your own life experience, where you are in your career. You know, how does this apply to you?
for what it's worth, I like hard questions. I have a.
But was it difficult, complex, and ongoing?
Yeah, no, it's mission critical, complex, and continuous improvement. You know, so Maggie's my chief of staff. She's here, and I do a lot of these round tables and all hands and stuff, and I like the hard questions, and I keep a private list of like the hardest questions I've had. I'm not afraid to say I don't know, and I'm not afraid to be uncertain. So heads up on that. So you know, you might ask a question. I have no idea, but anyway,
let's find out.
Yeah, we'll see.
I have 3 questions. One is, why don't we use AI to talk about planes? Why haven't we bridged the traffic control so more efficient, manage all of those planes? The other question, I'll ask 3 questions quick. If you're talking about someone springboard. Okay, thank you. If you talk about a company springboarding and moving ahead, like the insurance companies, what would happen to the person who has an idea? How would they be able to get into the business, because these companies are being moved so far ahead? And the last question is, how do I know you're not AI? Just
Well, if I was AI, I'd weigh 20 pounds less, probably. Yeah. So anyway, I wouldn't have gray hair, and I wouldn't have these wrinkles. I probably. But anyway, so we'll go with the last question. On the planes, there's a know your audience comment there, right? So, you know, I speak to a lot of people. I try to use stories that resonate. I can tell a lot of stories. You can ask my team. A few of them are here. I can tell a lot of stories. So I use the airplane one because that's one that everyone kind of gets. To answer your question about, you know, why, that's a great question for these guys. I can tell you, I know it definitively, the data that they have is on many different platforms. So stringing together the problem statement you asked of, could they do that? Definitely they could do it. The actual outcome and the actual use case of that would require a level of data integration and data mapping that they don't have. So technically it could work. Do they have the data for it in the right place, the right way? No, can't do it. And then on your question about insurance, I'll give you just the type of thing we're doing with insurance companies. We're getting into something called like agentic actuary. So actuaries are kind of like, that's an insurance company, those are some of the most prized people, right? They're the ones that make the risk call. They're the ones that actually effectively set pricing on things, which you can imagine, what's the pricing model? If you can get actuaries to decide faster or have more decisions or faster decisions or any of that other stuff, then there's real value. So think of it as, I made the comment of everyone wants to do intelligent work. If you can make an actuary slightly more intelligent, that has huge value for insurance companies. So in terms of AI at scale and adoption, we're trying to do things like that, actually impact specific roles. Maybe this side, I guess, we'll alternate.
Sorry, just one question.
We're in stereo.
You spoke about guardrails and that limiting the adoption of AI. For your company, what would a product have to address those guardrails for you to accelerate AI adoption?
Yeah, the guardrails, it's a great question. The guardrails problem starts actually at inventory. I have no inventory of the agents in an environment. I have no way of discovering it. There's new tools that are coming out that can do that, so that's a starting point. But the getting these guardrails in place, I don't know how to do it. We can do it on specific technologies, but the problem with some of the more advanced AI, like the Mythos that's coming out, they don't respect those guardrails. So then what do you do?
Right. They just say, oh, that looks like a guardrail.
Drive over it.
All right. Hello. I'm Brittany Harrison. So I work as a cloud engineer, and then I also have my own SaaS company. So I've niched it out to in-home healthcare providers. So I started out what you
Sorry,
would say
what providers?
in-home healthcare
Oh, okay.
providers. So
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
like Medicaid
Yeah.
providers, et cetera, in the state of Georgia. And so I have implemented different APIs and things like that for them that has completely like transformed how they were doing operations. And so I'm trying to think about ways to add AI in there. So I was just wondering in terms of small businesses, companies like myself, what would you recommend so that we can continue to streamline some of the other small to mid-sized businesses as well as we grow into AI, because they're not there yet at all. So
So I'll answer it as a sales advice.
Yeah.
I would go with adjacency, right? It sounds like you have a cool use case. You have something that's working. I'd figure out something that's very nearby to that and branch out that way. That's what I would do. I wouldn't go on a random data point. Don't throw a dart at a dartboard. You're already on the dartboard.
Right.
Just go next door.
thank you.
Hi, I'm Lucas Gustav from the German Central Bank, and I would be interested in when we can actually see this AI revolution reflecting in productivity numbers. So usually when we introduce some new technology at a big level, then we have this kind of J-curve effect where productivity might go down at first because people need to figure out how to use it, and then later on we see those productivity gains. And what are your clients actually experiencing when they introduce a new tool with artificial intelligence? So what is that delay in time until they actually see tangible, measurable economic productivity gains?
Yeah, I'll tell you on pricing, sight unseen, I'll promise to do things 30 to 40% cheaper within 3 years. So that's the productivity curve that I'm seeing right now. So within 3 years, it's 40% cheaper. The promise that I make as part of that is injecting education for people, right? So it's not about productivity for the purpose of cutting cost. Technical skills are too valuable. So it's productivity for the purpose of freeing up talent to work on other things. Most companies, actually all that I know, they have a massive backlog of work projects that they haven't done. If you can actually unleash their people to do that faster, that has real value.
All right, thank you. Could I maybe one other? Do you expect that to accelerate in the future? So maybe looking at more than 30 to 40%? Shorter time?
Let me tell you, before I had this role in Kyndryl, I was in charge of delivery for the firm. So I was like the head of the flashy lights. I had all the technical guys, right? And every year we'd have the same discussion, which is the productivity that we need to generate is impossible. And then at the end of every year, we would beat it. So to answer your question, the science will always tell you that here is the answer. The reality is we'll outpace it, always, because people are smart and they figure it out, and technology keeps getting better, even though it's impossible. Every year it's impossible. Every year we beat it.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Patrick. Thanks for the talk today. My question, the first one is actually right now we are in the cycle of like migrating existing system that's not in cloud, and then we're moving into cloud, and we're refining the process to make it work better, faster, efficient, and whatnot. Do you see a timeline where like in 5 years to 10 years, there's going to be less preventive or less monitoring system that we needed because we built in a scale where everything is working in the perfect or 90% level as we have more efficient tools like AI and other things? Or is it more going to be a process of like preventive measures for the next 5 years and 10 years that we're going to be in the same cycle of like, somebody messed up the code base, or somebody did some mistakes there. So it's still going to be a refining process throughout that cycle.
So I think it's industry and customer specific, probably application specific. I can tell you one of the things I'm selling most of is private clouds. A lot of reasons for that, but a lot of companies now are seeing that it's not all going to be public cloud. And they have to have a lot of the characteristics of a public cloud in a private nature. There's a ton of reasons for that. We can get into over a coffee or something like that. But I'm uncertain on that one. Back to, I'm not sure what'll happen. Right now, you can see the public cloud companies, their revenue continues to grow. But I can tell you the hottest seller that I have is actually private cloud. So how is that possible? I'm not quite sure. Not sure I really care to know the answer to the question, as long as they keep sending the checks, right?
Quick follow-up on that. On this basis of private cloud, definitely right now the data centers and all those aspects are becoming a big bottleneck. And we're reading an article over article where the cost of running a data center and having it more privatized is going to be the higher breakpoint for many big companies. Is Kyndryl looking into the long-term investment to run their space data centers in any near future, collaborating with IBM or other firms?
Data center space is like apartments on Park Avenue, right? It's valuable stuff, right? There was a point where data centers were considered a cost. Now it's an opportunity. It's a business school. It's a massive monetization opportunity. And, some companies need data centers in specific locations, specific states because of tax reasons and everything like that, and it drives the price up. So on the data center side, it's going to keep going. There's a massive backlog. I do think that the critical path of data center capacity is actually not the power anymore. I think it's quickly pivoting towards a supply chain issue on hardware. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Ask me later, maybe it'll change, right? Yeah.
I think we're just at time, so maybe we can do one more question. No pressure, but it needs to be awesome.
Thank you very much for the challenge and for your time here today. My question is how many people are bringing AI and focusing on the guardrails, on zero failures. And this might be true actually in your industry as a rare exception to that. For me, it feels counterintuitive to many of the leadership practices we're being taught, is that when you bring new people in your team, new tools in your team in this case, failure is part of learning and of exploration of new ideas. And sometimes the best ideas have come from mistakes. What's your take from the only exception maybe to this rule that mistakes are good? What's your take on the rest of the industries where maybe they should be much more free, much more confident in seeing what AI can bring, what mistakes, unexpected mistakes they're going to make, and saying, send it out, it'll create value, you'll create value, don't try to micromanage it.
I think maybe I'll answer it this way. When you make a decision or when you have a problem presented to you, the way I think about it is, what's the worst thing that could happen? What are all the bad things? Because most people, when you look at something, they look at, here's all the reasons to do it, right? That's kind of like how people's brains think, right? These are all the reasons to do it. Very few people say, these are all the reasons not to do it. Be highly critical of it. Then if you can actually get yourself comfortable with those reasons, then it's a good decision. So your point of failing fast or failing quickly, that's a normal thing in IT. But you can imagine some of the big companies I work with, that has major business consequences. Failures, like when you're running mission critical stuff, failure is definitely not a good word, right? That's a revenue stopped, right? People got put at risk. So you have to balance that out. So this pace of change, the technology is no longer in question. The technology is no longer going to be the gating factor. It's how comfortable can you get on the pace and scale of AI and the balance point of risk of why not. And if you can get comfortable with it, then that's the answer.
Great. You delivered. Nice job. Jamie Rutledge, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This was That's great. Thank you.